Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'll be doing my updated prediction for the 2024 presidential election, and I'll be talking about this race, what I think would happen if the election were to be held tomorrow. Now, as you all are probably aware, the election is not going to be held tomorrow, and this can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on what side of the spectrum you're on, who you support, and what your views are. But for these videos, I like to not... A lot of people will do these videos just with events they assume are going to happen between now and November. In February 2020, I don't think anyone could have predicted that COVID was going to have the effect on the country that it ended up having. In February 2020, especially towards the beginning, we knew it was a thing, but we didn't, I think, understand the extent to which it was going to fundamentally change our lives in many ways that are still reflected now. So, yeah, things do happen between winter and the following fall, and I understand the notion of saying, the election isn't tomorrow, don't do it that way, but these videos are good not because I think everything I say is going to be accurate in 9 months, but because you can go back and see what the country was at the time. So I will be doing this video based on what I think would happen if we were voting tomorrow, and obviously that's not the case, but this is where we are as a country right now. So with that out of the way, I will get right into it. We'll fill out the states as we always do. They're going to be safe for Joe Biden. These are the states that are going to vote for him. And, when I say safe, likely, lean, tilt, I do that in terms of probability, but often it also comes in the form of how or what we expect the margin of victory in these states to look like for each candidate. And in the states that are safe, you usually want them to be winning by 13, 14, 15 at the very least. But in some cases like D.C. or Massachusetts, those victories can be 40 points, 50 points, very big, very quickly. Now, of course, like I just said, I don't do these based off margin. I think doing, probabilities based on margin is kind of redundant because those things aren't really, they're similar, but they're not correlated. And so don't get too stuck on the margins. These are just by probability which states are, we know for a fact, safe. And so that's going to give us 28 electoral votes for Trump and 191 for Joe Biden. And we're now going to get into the more competitive states. Now, obviously, the states that I have blank here are not all competitive to the same degree. I will say right away that I think Pennsylvania is a lot more competitive than, say, New Mexico. But there are more interesting outcomes at stake here. Now, since I just mentioned Mexico, we'll start there. We're going to go with our likely Democratic states, of which Mexico is the first. Then we're going to go to Minnesota, Nebraska 2, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine. I don't really want to talk about these too much. I think that these are pretty standard. I always have these states in the likely column. The only one I think we could really debate would be Nebraska 2. But again, this district voted for Joe Biden. They don't have it on NYT, of course, when I look for it. But this district voted for Biden by 7% in 2020. It was redrawn to be about a point blue or about a point redder. So the new iteration of it voted for Biden by 6, but it's left trending. And even if Biden doesn't do that well in the suburbs nationwide, he will still win this district by probably at least 4 or 5. And I'd be shocked if it's close. Like, there's a chance it's maybe within 5, but there's not really a chance Trump wins it. So hence the likely categorization. And then for our likely Trump states, starting with Alaska, going over to Texas, Florida, Ohio, and then Maine's second district. This is a pretty big chunk of electoral votes for Trump. Texas, Florida, Ohio, these are all big states. And I do want to go through a few of these because Texas, I'm actually changing from lean to likely. I've had it at lean in almost all my 2024 videos, but I'm moving up to likely. That could go back down to lean as we get closer, maybe as Biden starts to pull better. But right now, if the election were held tomorrow, I think Biden would really struggle with turnout in cities like Houston, Dallas, and more progressive areas like San Antonio and Austin. And then you'd also likely have to consider the fact that I think Trump is, at this point, more likely than not to do well with Hispanic voters in the rural areas. And obviously, the Hispanic vote is not like monolithic. Hispanic voters in cities and suburbs are very likely to trend different ways than in rural areas. But in South Texas, which is very rural and not super educated and much more religious and, culturally conservative, we saw in 2020 that Biden did really poorly. We saw massive swings towards Trump in the region, and Democrats have previously done well there. They're not doing well there anymore. And, these trends were in many ways continued in 2022. So I would expect Trump to continue to do well in South Texas, and even though that isn't a huge chunk of the electorate, it's enough to probably make me feel comfortable putting it in the likely column, which is a bold characterization. But at this point, Biden, I don't think, is going to make a play for Texas. He knows he's in a close race, and he's not going to spend time in Texas if he knows that he hasn't, locked up Michigan or Pennsylvania. So that's my justification for that. I think everything else is pretty consensus here. Florida, very right-trending state. I know it only voted for Trump by 3 in 2020, but it's probably going to vote for him by at least double that this time. And then Ohio voted for Trump by 7, right-trending. I think that's self-explanatory. So the rest of these states I'd consider them to be competitive. This is pretty, aside from Texas, this is kind of the same battleground map that I've always had for 2024, going back years. And that isn't really all that surprising. I think as we get closer to the election, some states could be added. I think Texas could come back. We could also see some states be removed. If we get to a situation in which Trump is outright favored to win the election, as the polls are suggesting right now, I think we could see North Carolina move out and into the higher, leaner, lower likely column for Trump. In terms of margin, Trump doesn't have the upside in North Carolina that he does in Texas or Florida, but certainly since there's no Senate race on the ballot in the state, I don't really think Biden's going to make a huge play for it, especially if he thinks he's in a really close race. Because again, you don't go to North Carolina or Texas when you're in a dead heat in Michigan or Pennsylvania. So we'll start there. I think North Carolina is pretty clearly in the lean column for Trump right now. A lot of people, especially last year, made the case for Biden being outright favored to win North Carolina. I don't really get behind. I never really got behind that, and I think right now it looks especially weak. That case, the argument was that the suburbs are growing and making up a larger share of the state's electorate, and they're trending to the left. And while that notion isn't false, it's also not really representative of how the state's trended in recent years. Democrats in 2022, Sherry Beasley did really well and likely would have actually won had we seen a 2020 level electorate. But that is proof that left trends in the suburbs, where Beasley did very well, better than people thought she was going to do in that Senate race, they aren't necessarily enough to save Democrats. Biden's going to struggle with turnout in big cities, I think, especially with progressive voters. A lot of colleges, North Carolina, a lot of younger voters. It's a growing state. It's sort of becoming a tech hub, and you see the research triangle. There are a lot of elements of the state that are left trending, but they're also a drawback for Biden because he is likely to lose support with younger voters, which has been corroborated in every poll. Now, not every poll is accurate. Not every poll is worth looking at. But when a trend is being picked up by literally every single pollster in the country, you're going to have to believe it to at some point. So North Carolina just doesn't look like it's the year for blue North Carolina. Obviously, it's not out of the picture. If Biden's doing better in the next few months, I might move it back into the tilt column. But for now, it is clearly a state that Trump should very likely win. Now, to go over to our next state that I think that Trump is probably going to win would be Nevada. Nevada's going to be in the tilt column. It's close to North Carolina at this moment. But we saw how Democrats fared in Nevada in 2022. Catherine Cortez Masto won, but the electorate was Trump plus 5. And so you might look at that and say, well, hold on, that's good for Democrats because they won a Senate race in an electorate that was R plus 5 with really bad turnout. In a presidential year, you'd expect the turnout to return to normal. But the problem for Democrats is that their turnout in Nevada is almost entirely dependent on Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is. So Biden won Nevada, as you can see right here, in 2020 by around, 34,000 votes, less than that. And he won Clark County by 91,000 votes. So literally, the margin Biden won Clark County by was almost 3 times the margin he won statewide by. So even if he loses a couple percentage points in Clark County, which Democrats in 2022 did, Catherine Cortez Masto didn't do all that well there, even though she won, which was impressive. And Steve Sisolak didn't really do that well there either. He actually lost, as an incumbent governor, which is hard to do. Usually incumbent governors win, and Steve Sisolak lost. So Nevada in 2022, I know Democrats, won the big prize, which is the Senate race, and they're happy about that, as they should be. The problem for them is that it didn't really convince me that they're going to be, in a position to do well with turnout in Clark County in 2024, especially if you buy into Biden's struggles with Hispanic voters, with black voters, with young voters. Las Vegas, city with a lot of younger working class voters of color, and those voters swung towards Trump in 2020, and in the polls, they have really soured on Biden. So Biden did just enough to win Nevada in 2024, and that was with limit. Trump did not go to Nevada to the extent that he will likely go to Nevada in 2024. Trump thought he was going to lose Nevada. Biden was up in the polls in Nevada by 7 or 8 points. It should never have been this close, and it was close in 2020. 2022, Democrats got lucky in some cases, unlucky in others. In 2024, I think Trump wins it, for now at least. So, and again, this is all if it were held tomorrow. Now, moving on to our next state, I'm going to give one to Biden here. I think that he will win Pennsylvania. Now, I've been pretty bearish on him in my past couple tangents, but Nevada, North Carolina. Now, Pennsylvania to me is interesting because I think it'll be very close. But at the same time, Biden, I don't really see the path for him to lose it. Now, obviously, it's not safe. I obviously understand how Trump can win Pennsylvania. It's very simple. But the problem for Republicans in Pennsylvania is that they have not won anything there of substantial value since 2016. And before anyone comes at me and says, "Oh, well, they won the treasurer race in 2020," yeah, I mean, yes, they did. The position of treasurer in most states is often ceremonious or ceremonial. Ceremonial. I don't know. I don't really. I'm not good at speaking English sometimes, but I hope I'm able to convey the point that I'm trying to make here, which is that these offices. First of all, I don't think the average Pennsylvanian knows who their treasurer is. If you did a poll, I'd be shocked if 20% people were able to say who the treasurer of their state is in any state. And more importantly, that position of treasurer, or attorney general, secretary of state, they're often just ladder climbing positions. So it's like, oh, as the treasurer, now I'm going to run for Senate, now I'm going to run for governor, etc. And that's what Josh Shapiro did with the attorney general, by the way, who's now the governor of Pennsylvania. Again, the last real races Republicans won in this state were in 2016 when Trump won the presidency here and Pat Toomey won the Senate race. In that Senate seat that Pat Toomey won in 2016, Democrats won it by 5 in 2022. They did really well there. And that was despite the fact that they had bad turnout in the city of Philadelphia. Again, Philadelphia in 2022, make no mistake, Democrats did well in Pittsburgh and they did enough in the suburbs to win, but Philadelphia was not good for John Fetterman or for Josh Shapiro. But Josh Shapiro that race was over by election day. John Fetterman, if you had told me the morning of election day that Philadelphia turnout was going to be that much less than it was in 2018, I probably would have thought Fetterman was on track to lose. That just says so much about this state, which is that Democrats, even if they suffer a big turnout loss in the big city like Philadelphia, they can still win. That's what Fetterman did. He won comfortably. He won by over 5%, or I think just under 5%. So Biden, if you're worried about his struggles with young voters or with voters in urban areas, that is a thing that I have expressed. If it happens in Philadelphia, it would need to happen to a scale much bigger than what happened in 2022. And that's not counting the fact that I think Trump's going to do really poorly in the Philly suburbs because they are growing, they're getting more progressive as well, and they too will likely swing towards Joe Biden, even if he doesn't do that well nationwide. So if the election were held tomorrow, Biden would struggle in a lot of places. I think he'd hold on to Pennsylvania. Now, let's go over to another Rust Belt state, which I think is also very interesting and also potentially a game changer. Pennsylvania is the most important state, but these other states are, in terms of electoral votes, especially for Biden to get to 270, I think that they're important. And that's Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, I'm for now going to give to Trump. And this one I have a lot less to say about than my other states because it's just so back and forth. Functionally, if you flipped a coin, you'd be about as accurate as anyone else to predict this race. It comes down to turnout, comes down to persuasion on election day. It comes down to, whether Biden wins 58% of independents or 53% of independents. But I'm going to give it to Trump for now because I think if the election were held tomorrow, Biden would probably struggle in Milwaukee, and I'm not sure how great Madison would be for him. Madison was really good for Democrats in 2022 and 2023 with the Supreme Court race in the state. I don't know how good it would be for Biden right now because I don't know the extent to which we can expect him to have a turnout with younger voters. And Madison's a very progressive city. It's where the University of Wisconsin is. It's very educated. It is easily the most, I think it's one of the most progressive parts of the Midwest, just as a city. It's not a super big city, but it is very progressive. So if Biden's going to struggle there, that could be a problem because Madison's kind of, been Herculean for Democrats in the past few election cycles. Dane County in 2020, just to kind of do some brief math here, Biden won Wisconsin by, I think, 20,700 votes. He won Dane County by, 180,000 votes. So he cannot afford to lose very much. He can lose a couple thousand, but not much more than that. And that's not even counting Milwaukee turnout potentially falling because Biden won Milwaukee County by, 180,000 votes, give or take. So, margins are thin. Trump could definitely lose Wisconsin, but if we're held tomorrow, favored to win by a little bit. And then that leaves Michigan, Arizona, Georgia. I think I'm going to give Trump Georgia first. Now, this is a state that I think is most likely to change between now and November Georgia's been really good for Democrats the past few cycles. And the fact that Raphael Warnock won in that electorate of like the Trump plus 5 electorate in Georgia, or I think there was maybe the Trump plus 3 electorate. I don't know, but it was a Trump voting electorate that he won the runoff with. That says a lot. I think Trump's going to really struggle in the suburbs of Atlanta, just because they're one of the fastest growing collection of suburbs in America, and because they're just so educated and increasingly diverse. It's an area that I think could really become just unbearable for Republicans the next few years. If Trump wins Georgia in 2024, I think he'll be the last Republican to win it for a while, federally or presidentially at least. And so that kind of leaves us in a spot where the only way Trump can win is if turnout in Atlanta crashes, which is possible because a lot of this, like the whole video kind of is just if turnout crashes in the big cities, Trump could win. And like the only state where I think Democrats can actually like withstand that, like with a lot, and I say that with a lot of confidence, is Pennsylvania, and that's why I gave Pennsylvania to Biden. But Milwaukee, Las Vegas, Atlanta, those are cities where Democrats need to do really well. And in 2020, they did just well enough to like eke out incredible. Like Biden won Georgia by like 11,000 votes, so incredibly narrow wins. And the suburbs are going to potentially carry him, but I think if it were held tomorrow, just based on the polls, Trump would win Georgia. And so that leaves Arizona and Michigan. And I'm going to give Trump Arizona. And then Michigan, I don't love this, but I'll keep it with Biden just because he won it by like a good amount in 2020. He won it by, I think 100. Yeah, he won it by like 153,000 votes. So, he certainly has some room to fall here and still win. A lot of people have been saying that if Biden loses Michigan, it'll be because of Gaza. And I don't want to get into that because it's just such a controversial issue, and no good can be attained from me talking about it for a short amount of time, like in a YouTube video. But the argument for Biden losing Michigan right now is just that Arab voters in Dearborn and areas outside of Detroit are going to swing against him massively because he's been too pro-Israel. And whatever you think of that, whether you think Biden's pro-Iran or whether you think his response to this conflict has been sufficient, whether you call yourself pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, I really don't want to get into that right now. But the fact of the matter is that Arab voters make up 2% of Michigan's electorate, if that. And even if Biden does like significantly worse with them than he did in 2020, which was already pretty bad, he actually, I think, lost support with Arab voters. It won't be enough to cost him the state unless it's like decided by like 10,000 votes. So unless the margin was like 2016 levels, probably won't be enough to cost him the state. Now, is it a possibility it's as close to 2016? Yeah, definitely. But most, like 8 out of 10 outcomes, it's not as close. 9 out of 10 outcomes, it's not as close as 2016. And I think as long as he holds on to these margins in Oakland County and does a little better in Livingston, where he did 7% better than Hillary Clinton there, so it's left running enough. He'll probably crack 40 here, just as a eyeballing it. He'll probably win Michigan. I think it'll be by a bit less, but he'll win it by like 1.5. He won it by 2.8 in 2020. He wins it by 1.5 this time, maybe 1.2 or something like that. But I think you get the point I'm making. Then Arizona's the last one. Arizona, I think, those suburbs are just like so bad for Republicans, but at the same time, I really worry about Biden's ability to do well. In Phoenix itself is kind of outvoted, because Maricopa County is kind of just one big metro area. It has like 2 million votes in 2020, so it's almost I think it's basically the majority of the state's electorate. I think like 54% of Arizonans live in Maricopa County. I might be wrong about that, but I think it's a majority, probably increased because Maricopa County is growing at a faster rate than the state as a whole. The main point that I make here is that even though Phoenix itself gets outvoted by its surrounding suburbs, which is probably good for Biden, it's still like in a state as close as Arizona, even a 35 to 40,000 vote drop could be enough to cost Biden, because this was the closest state by raw votes in 2020. By percentage, it was Georgia, but by raw votes, it was Arizona. And because there's not one but two cities where I think Democrats could lose support in both Phoenix and Tucson, that I think could be a problem for Biden. Because, he won Pima by 100,000. That's, 10 times the statewide margin. He won Maricopa by, 45,000, but obviously lose support in Phoenix, and you're essentially breaking even in Maricopa. He'll still win Maricopa County. He'll probably win it by more than he did in maybe a similar amount to what he did in 2020, because he'll do well enough in the suburbs and it's just growing fast and that'll help him. But he's like, this is the closest state for right now, but he would probably just struggle with turnout and with progressive voters at the universities. And I just think Democratic turnout here won't be great. So, yeah, that's kind of my prediction for right now. If again, I have 6 states in the tilt because it's February. I don't have any strong opinions yet. But that is my analysis of what I think would happen if we held the election tomorrow. So, that's not the case, which if you believe me, that's good news for Joe Biden. He still has 9 months to make up ground. But let me know what you think. Let me know who you think is going to win, and let me know what you think would happen if it were held tomorrow. So, again, thanks for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all in the next one.